Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring Wallace D. Wattles, The Science of Being Well. I think you're going to like this one because it's really all about taking a practical approach to well-being. Not just, positive thinking, but like concrete steps you can take.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is how Wattles starts the book off.
Mhm.
In the preface, he uses this anecdote about miracle working bones, and it kind of sets the stage for this whole idea that our beliefs have this incredible power to influence healing.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So let's get into the science of being well. Wattles begins with this concept of a living substance that he says permeates like absolutely everything. And the most fascinating part is he claims that the fundamental nature of this substance is perfect health.
Right, and then he goes on to say that this substance is super responsive to thought. It basically takes the form of whatever it's focused on. And since we are part of this substance, that means each of us has a principle of health within us.
Okay, but if the source code is all about health, then where does disease come from?
Well, Waddle says disease stems from our own imperfect thoughts. It's like we've inherited this legacy of negative thinking about health, passed down through generations.
So it's not just our own personal anxieties. It's like we're carrying the baggage of our ancestors' fears about illness, too.
That's the idea. And here's where Waddles gets even more interesting. He argues that relying solely on external systems or remedies won't actually address the root cause.
So true well-being has to begin with a shift in our mindset.
Exactly. It's an inside job.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually make that shift?
Yeah.
How do we start to embrace this science of being well?
So Waddles puts a lot of emphasis on cultivating what he calls a strong conception of health. And it's not just about visualizing a perfect body.
So it's not about like striving for a six-pack or perfect skin.
Right. It's much deeper than that. It's about really understanding how a truly healthy person lives, acts, and functions in the world.
So it's like creating this blueprint for well-being that goes beyond the physical.
Exactly. And a big part of that is actively rejecting those thoughts of disease and replacing them with thoughts of health.
Okay, but how do we actually control our thinking? Our minds can be pretty unruly at times.
Well, Wattles talks about using willpower to focus our attention, to intentionally direct it towards the positive. And, there's actually a lot of research in neuroscience now that supports this idea.
Really? So it's not just wishful thinking.
No, not at all. Studies have shown that focusing on gratitude, for example, can literally rewire your brain for positivity. It can actually lead to lower levels of stress hormones and even improve your immune function.
Wow. So there's actual science behind the power of positive thinking. And gratitude seems to be a big piece of this. Wattles talks about thanking this living substance for health as a way to strengthen our faith and deepen our connection to well-being.
Yeah, and it's not just about saying thank you. It's about actively feeling that gratitude.
Yeah.
Recognizing and appreciating the health you have right now, even if it's not perfect.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about when things do go wrong? What about when we're experiencing pain or illness? Does Wattles suggest we just ignore those feelings?
Well, this is one of the most fascinating things about Wattles' approach. He says you shouldn't view pain as an enemy to resist, but as a sign that that principle of health is working within you to correct imbalances.
So it's like pain is a messenger, not a villain.
Exactly. He encourages us to mentally cooperate with the healing process rather than fighting against it.
So instead of like gritting our teeth and just trying to bear it, he's saying we should try to understand what our bodies are trying to tell us through pain.
Right. It's about becoming aware of those signals and working with them instead of just trying to suppress them. And this leads us to the next key aspect of Wattles' science. He doesn't just focus on thinking the right way, he also provides very specific guidance on how to act in a healthy way. He starts with what he calls the voluntary functions of life.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the first one on the list?
He begins with eating, and his advice here might surprise you. He says you should only eat when you experience what he calls earned hunger.
Earned hunger. What does that even mean? Like we have to work for our food or something?
He's not talking about physical labor. It's about only eating when there's a genuine physiological need for food. Not out of habit, boredom, or just because it's breakfast time.
Wait, so he's saying we should skip breakfast. Is he advocating for intermittent fasting?
He doesn't use that term specifically, but he does suggest delaying your first meal until noon unless you experience true hunger before then.
Wow, that definitely goes against the grain of everything we've been told about breakfast being the most important meal of the day.
Right, and it really challenges those deeply ingrained beliefs about when and why we eat. It makes you stop and think about whether you're eating because your body actually needs fuel or because you're conditioned to eat at certain times.
I'm starting to see how this science requires us to really tune into our bodies and question those ingrained habits.
And there's another really interesting part of his approach to eating. He says you can eat any food that's considered a staple in your region. He has this deep trust in the eternal wisdom that led different cultures to choose certain foods over generations based on what was naturally available and what nourished their bodies.
So no need to stress over restrictive diets or jump on the latest food trend.
That's the beauty of it. Wattles is all about simplifying and trusting in what nature provides. But there is one important caveat. He's also a huge advocate for mindful eating.
Okay, what does that mean?
He stresses chewing thoroughly, savoring every bite, and stopping the moment you feel satisfied, even if there's still delicious food left on your plate.
Even if it's chocolate cake?
Even if it's chocolate cake. He argues that overeating even healthy food disrupts your body's natural balance. So paying close attention to how you eat and stopping when you're truly satisfied is key to maintaining that balance.
This is making me rethink my entire relationship with food.
Oh,
Okay, what's next on the list of voluntary functions?
Well, after eating, Wattles moves on to drinking. And his advice here is pretty straightforward. Water is your best bet.
So water first, treats later.
Exactly. But he's not overly strict. He acknowledges that if you're following his principles for eating, you can allow yourself moderate indulgences with other beverages.
Okay, good to know. I do love my morning coffee.
Okay.
Now, what about breathing? Does he have any specific techniques we should be following?
Wattles doesn't dive into specific breathing techniques like you might find in yoga or meditation, but he does emphasize the importance of maintaining good posture and having a flexible chest.
So slouching is a no-no.
He believes it hinders your body's ability to take in the life force present in the air. And of course, fresh, clean air is crucial.
Makes sense. So good posture isn't just about aesthetics. It actually impacts our health.
Right, it's all connected. What I find really interesting is how Wattles encourages us to consciously recognize that we are breathing in life with each breath.
So it's not just a mechanical process. It's about receiving this vital energy that's all around us.
Exactly. And this conscious awareness of breath is something that's been emphasized in various spiritual and mindfulness practices for centuries.
This is making me think about how I breathe and how I can bring more intention to it. Okay, so we've covered eating, drinking, and breathing. What about sleep? What insights does Wattles offer on getting a good night's rest?
He views sleep as a time of profound renewal and emphasizes the need for ample fresh air in the bedroom, even in cold weather.
I'm sensing a theme here. Fresh air seems to be a recurring element in his science.
Absolutely. And just like with eating, he believes the mental approach to sleep is just as important as the physical environment. He suggests going to bed with a grateful mindset, trusting in the restorative power of sleep.
So no scrolling through stressful news or social media before bed?
Right. It's about letting go of those worries and surrendering to that process of rejuvenation.
This is all making so much sense, but it also seems like a lot to remember and implement.
Well, Wattles acknowledges that this is a practice. It's not something you achieve overnight. He emphasizes consistency and perseverance, even if you slip up sometimes.
That's reassuring to hear. This has been a fascinating dive into those foundational principles of the science of being well. We've covered a lot of ground, and I'm already feeling inspired to make some changes in my own life.
It's amazing how powerful a shift in perspective can be.
It's funny, as we were talking about sleep and fresh air, it struck me how interconnected all these voluntary functions are. Like Wattles is saying that every aspect of our daily lives, from what we eat to how we breathe, it all contributes to our overall well-being.
It really is a holistic view. It's not about isolating one specific action. It's about creating a lifestyle that supports health on all levels.
And a big part of that, as we've discussed, is aligning our actions with our thoughts. It's like we can't truly embody health if our actions are contradicting, our thoughts.
Absolutely. It's like trying to drive a car with one foot on the gas and the other on the brake. You're not going to get very far.
So we have to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Exactly. And it's not just about the big things. It's about those seemingly small actions, too. Like, Wattles believes that even something as simple as maintaining good posture throughout the day can have a significant impact.
Really? Just standing up straight can make that much of a difference?
He argues that good posture not only improves physical health, but it also conveys a sense of confidence and vitality, which in turn can influence how we feel about ourselves.
It's interesting how those small choices can have such a ripple effect on our well-being. Now, let's face it, maintaining that positive mindset can be tough.
Yeah.
Especially when we're surrounded by negativity. Wattles even talks about how to deal with those social situations where everyone seems to be swapping stories about their ailments.
Oh, yeah. That's definitely something a lot of people struggle with. It's hard to stay positive when you're constantly bombarded with, tales of woe. You don't want to be rude, but you also don't want to get sucked into that vortex of negativity.
It's like a contagious disease of negativity.
Yep. Right. So Wattles advises us to politely disengage from those conversations, mentally affirming our own health and focusing on creating a positive mental environment for ourselves.
It's about setting those boundaries and protecting our own mental space.
Exactly. We can't control what other people say or think, but we can control how we react and what we choose to focus on.
And this ties back to the idea of consciously directing our attention and choosing to dwell on the positive. Now, what about when we're faced with physical pain? Can we really maintain a positive mindset when our body is sending us signals of distress?
This is where Wattles' perspective gets really interesting. He suggests that instead of feeling pain, we should try to view it as feedback from our bodies, a sign that the principle of health is actually working to correct an imbalance.
So it's like our bodies are constantly striving for this state of equilibrium, and pain is just a signal that something is off.
Exactly. He encourages us to mentally cooperate with this healing process, to see pain as part of that journey back to health, not as a punishment or a setback.
So instead of tensing up and resisting the pain, he's saying we should try to relax and trust that our bodies are working to heal.
And there's actually a growing body of research that supports this idea of the mind-body connection in healing. Studies have shown that relaxation techniques and positive visualization can reduce pain perception and promote faster healing.
That's fascinating. So there's a real scientific basis for this approach.
Yeah.
But what about those times when we're not necessarily in pain, but we're feeling weak or fatigued? What does Wattles suggest we do then?
He advises us to rest and use this time to cultivate gratitude for the strength that is coming. It's about shifting our focus from a sense of lack to a feeling of abundance, recognizing that our bodies are constantly renewing themselves.
So instead of dwelling on our weakness and feeling sorry for ourselves, we should visualize ourselves regaining our strength and energy.
Precisely. It's about trusting in that innate principle of health to restore our vitality.
There's one thing that often comes up in conversations about health, and I'm curious to know what Wattles has to say about it. It's the topic of, constipation.
Ugh. Ah, yes, the dreaded C word. It seems to be a source of anxiety for many people.
So what's his take?
Well, he suggests that if we're eating in a natural and healthy way as he prescribes, constipation shouldn't be a major issue. He argues that overeating and consuming processed foods are the primary culprits behind this problem.
So by addressing the root cause, which is, our eating habits, we can eliminate the symptom.
Exactly. It's another example of that holistic approach. And he encourages us to trust in our body's natural processes, to let go of that anxiety and embrace a more relaxed approach to, our bodily functions.
Okay, this is all making so much sense, but there's one thing that's been nagging at me. We've talked about eating, breathing, sleeping, even posture. But what about exercise? Does Wattles have anything to say about physical activity?
He does, but his approach might surprise you. He's not a fan of forcing ourselves to do exercises we hate just for the sake of burning calories or getting ripped. He advises us to engage in physical activities that we genuinely enjoy, activities that make us feel alive and energized.
So it's not about punishing ourselves at the gym. It's about finding ways to move our bodies that bring us joy.
Exactly. He suggests that when we move our bodies with pleasure, we're more likely to stick with it and experience the true benefits of exercise. Increased energy, improved mood, and a sense of vitality.
It's about integrating exercise into our lives in a way that feels natural and sustainable, not as a chore we dread.
And speaking of things we might dread, I know some people are curious about Wattles' views on fasting.
It's definitely a hot topic these days with all the different fasting regimens out there.
Mm-hmm.
So what's his take?
Well, he doesn't completely dismiss the idea of fasting, but he suggests that prolonged fasts are rarely necessary. He argues that if we're truly listening to our bodies and eating only when hungry, we'll naturally find a rhythm that works for us without needing to impose, these strict fasting schedules.
It's about honoring our individual needs and trusting our intuition rather than blindly following the latest trends.
Exactly. And he reminds us that even when we do choose to fast, we can maintain a positive mindset by focusing on the cleansing and rejuvenating effects of the process. It's about reframing our perspective and seeing fasting as an opportunity for growth, not deprivation.
This is all so insightful, but it can also feel a bit overwhelming. There's so much to think about and put into practice. How do we even begin to live this science of being well?
Well, Wattles acknowledges that it can feel daunting at first, but he encourages us to start small and focus on one or two key principles at a time. He summarizes his science in a few simple guidelines. Think health act in alignment with health, and cultivate gratitude for the health you're receiving.
It sounds so simple, but I imagine it takes real conscious effort to put those principles into practice to make them a part of our daily lives.
You're right. It's about making gradual shifts in our thinking and our behavior. It's a journey, not a destination, and Wattles emphasizes the importance of perseverance.
It's about showing up for ourselves each day and making choices that support our well-being even when it's challenging.
Exactly. And he reminds us that health is not just the absence of disease, it's a state of vitality, joy, and abundance. It's about embracing the process and enjoying the ride.
That's beautiful. It's about thriving, not just surviving. This has been such a fascinating exploration of Wattles' ideas. I'm feeling really inspired to start incorporating these principles into my own life. What about you? What final insights have you gleaned from his work?
You know what resonates most with me is his emphasis on personal responsibility. He empowers us to take ownership of our health by recognizing the power of our thoughts and our actions. It's not about relying on external systems or remedies. It's about cultivating a deep understanding of our innate capacity for well-being.
It's about recognizing that we have the power to heal ourselves.
Exactly. And he reminds us that health is not just the absence of disease, it's a state of vitality, joy, and abundance. It's about living life to the fullest.
This has been a truly inspiring deep dive.
Yeah.
What are your final thoughts on this science of being? Well, I'm curious to hear what stuck with you.
What strikes me is how ahead of his time Wattles was. You know, he was talking about the mind-body connection and the power of thought long before these ideas became mainstream. And his emphasis on personal responsibility and a holistic approach to health is more relevant now than ever.
We're going to wrap up in just a bit, but first we'd love for you to take a moment and reflect on what's resonated most with you from our dive into Wattles' work. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into The Science of Being Well by Wallace D. Wattles. And it's been quite a journey exploring his ideas about the power of thought, the principle of health, and the importance of aligning our actions with our thoughts.
Absolutely. We've covered so much ground, from those practical tips on eating and breathing to those, subtler shifts in perspective, like viewing pain as feedback and cultivating gratitude as a daily practice.
But before we wrap up, let's try to distill it all down. What are the key takeaways? The nuggets of wisdom that our listener can walk away with and actually apply to their life.
If we really boil down Wattles' message, I think it comes down to a few powerful ideas. First, you have so much more control over your health than you might realize. Your thoughts and beliefs have a direct impact on your physical well-being.
It's about recognizing that you have agency. You're not just a passive passenger in your own body.
Exactly. Second nature is constantly working towards health. There's this inherent drive towards balance and wholeness within you and in the universe itself. Wattles calls it the living substance.
It's like we have this incredible supportive force on our side, always nudging us towards well-being.
Right. And third, gratitude is key. Acknowledging and appreciating the health you have, no matter how small, actually amplifies it and draws more of it into your life.
It's like that saying, what you focus on expands. Gratitude for health creates this ripple effect, attracting more health into your experience.
Precisely. And finally, living this science of being well is an ongoing practice. It's not like a destination you reach. It's about making those conscious choices each day that align with your personal conception of health.
It's those small, consistent steps, how you eat, how you move, what you think about, how you breathe. It's about weaving these principles into the fabric of your life.
As we've been discussing Wattles' ideas, it's really struck me how much they resonate with modern scientific discoveries. For example, his emphasis on gratitude. It aligns perfectly with research on neuroplasticity and the power of positive emotions to rewire our brains for well-being.
It's amazing how these ancient wisdom traditions are being validated by modern science. It's like we're coming full circle, rediscovering the power of our minds and bodies to heal.
Now, before we wrap up, I have a final thought for you to ponder. Something to spark your curiosity and maybe guide you on your own journey to well-being. It builds on something that Wattles mentions but doesn't fully explore.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Wattles talks about this living substance as being present in everything. It's the life force in the air. We breathe the water. We drink the food we eat. So how might consciously recognizing this living substance in everything we consume enhance our experience of health?
That's a really interesting question. It's like he's suggesting that we can tap into that vital energy more fully if we bring awareness to its presence in every bite, every sip, every breath.
Exactly. Could it be that by consciously acknowledging this life force, we deepen our connection to it and amplify its effects? It's a fascinating idea to explore.
It's almost like taking gratitude to another level, expressing appreciation not just for the food itself, but for the very essence of life it contains.
And maybe by doing so, we create a more harmonious relationship with our bodies and with the natural world around us.
This has been such an eye-opening exploration of the science of being well. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling incredibly inspired to start putting these principles into practice.
It's been a pleasure diving into this material with you. I hope our conversation has sparked a desire to, learn more, to explore your own path to well-being.
And to you, our listener, we wish you all the best on your journey to greater health and vitality. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive into